Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, a podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I am your host, Chris Gargano. The story this week is about following your passion. Our guest has done that twice. His name is Marty Lurie. He's a 2021 Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame inductee. We met while I was with the San Francisco Giants. We hosted a program together along with another Bay Area Radio Hall of Famer, Rennell Brooks Moon. Marty grew up in New York, right near Ebbets Field, and developed a love for baseball. He then went to law school and developed a love for practicing law. He started a practice. He then moved to California and started his own radio business. Basically, he sells, he hosts, and markets his radio shows. You want to hear this story. It's compelling. Again, about following your passion, leading yourself, and showing leadership and giving back to those that helped you along the way. Ladies and gentlemen, Marty Lurie. How are you, Marty? How's it going in Scottsdale?
Well, I'm doing great. Being in spring training is invigorating. You're bonding again with baseball. It's a rebirth. The whole season is ahead of us. Who knows where the story is going to take us? No one's lost a game. Everyone's had the best winter humanly possible. Everyone's in great shape. And if you're not hitting, it's spring training. If you are hitting, hey, you got something here. So everything is good about spring training.
Now, Marty, we're going to talk about a host of things. Baseball, of course, is going to be in the center, but it's also about you. Marty, you grew up out here where I am on the East Coast in New York, born in Brooklyn. Tell me about your childhood and how you gravitated towards this beautiful game that we both love very much.
Well, I was born in 1946 and lived in Brooklyn until 1956, so 10 years old. And if you ask anyone the greatest era of baseball, they will tell you when they were 9 or 10 years old, because that's when you really bond with the game and you can understand the players and everything else. So for me, growing up in Brooklyn, getting baseball cards, my father had passed away when I was 4, and an uncle introduced me to baseball. And it was just magic to me. It gave me something to hold on to. If you were a kid in Brooklyn, you loved the Dodgers, you didn't like the Giants, you hated the Yankees, and you lived your life through the baseball cards and through the spring training reports and the day-to-day story and Vince Scully, and the TV was just happening then. So it became my unconditional friend. I think that's the best way to explain it. And it's been there my whole life whenever I need it. And as a kid in Brooklyn, heck, in the schoolyard, we'd flip cards. We'd see who could get the card closest to the wall. If you got a leaner, it was a big deal. We played stickball in the street. We played stoop ball. We played box ball. We played king and queen on the corner. We had a Spalding. If it went in the sewer, we were devastated. So it was just a great way of life. And baseball really was at the heart of it.
Wonderfully put, Marty. And so you're born in 1946. You live on the East Coast till 1956. I know you went to college in Florida and such. We'll get to that. But Marty, you were there when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier with the Dodgers. It was the next year. You were 1. But I'm sure you went to Ebbets Field to watch him and others, Gil Hodges and all those other great players of the Dodgers in that era. What was that like, going into Ebbets Field and watching those teams?
Well, it was magic. You thought that you were in heaven. You in those days, we didn't have color TV, and most of the black and white TV stories or magazines, newspaper, everything was black and white. So when you walk into Ebbets Field as an 8-year-old, and all of a sudden, and you know the story, it's true to just about everyone who walks into any ballpark the first time. You see that green grass, you see the white uniform, you see the billboards, you see the scoreboard, and you have walked into the most beautiful picture you could ever imagine. So for me, as a kid walking into Ebbets Field, it was absolutely magic. And even today, when I see the Dodgers in their home uniform, that white uniform with the red number under the heart, every time I see it, it stops me just for a second to flash back to what Brooklyn was like. And it's so important, those numbers. Clem Labine's number and Campy's number and Gil Hodges' number and Jackie's number and Pee Wee Reese's number, Don Newcomb's number. I don't care what it was. We knew them all. And Mark Ellis, who's a wonderful second baseman for the A's and the Dodgers, wore number 14. And I said to Mark, you wear number 14 here. It's a very important number. He says, oh, of course, it's Mike Scioscia's number. I said, no, sorry, it's Gil Hodges' number. And I wanted him to understand that the roots of Brooklyn never are severed, ever. And it's the heart of the way we became baseball fans, and it still lives with me to today.
I love that. And your passion and joy for the game has not subsided at all. I could vouch for that, having known you all these years. But let's back up even more, Marty. So then you couldn't go to games all day. You had to get an education. And tell us about, how you went to Florida and then Miami and those schools and studied law. Tell me how that evolution took place. Obviously, continuing your love of baseball, but we want to know about, how you became a lawyer and practiced law at some point. Soon after.
Baseball stayed with me. I was one of those kids, even as a 10 or 11-year-old, when we moved to Miami Beach. I read the Sporting News, the Bible of baseball, and they would hold it for me every Monday in the little drugstore on the corner of 74th Street and Collins Avenue in Miami Beach. And I would buy my baseball cards there. And, to get your cards at the beginning of the season, it was always thrilling. So baseball was still in my heart. Played Little League for the first time. I had a uniform. My God, I would be the first kid. This is a true story. I was the first kid at the park every day. And I had my uniform on and my first baseman's glove, and it was all magic to me. And I ended up going to the University of Florida, and I majored in accounting. And that's what everyone thought. You love numbers and all this stuff from baseball, and numbers never scared me because of the baseball cards. I could figure out batting averages in my head and all that. So it's 1967, and the Vietnam War was at its peak, and Lyndon Johnson was sending more troops to the Tet Offensive and all that. And I decided at that point, I had my deferment, and student deferments were still available for graduate school. And I had a teacher in undergrad in the business school by the name of Wyatt. That was his last name. And he wrote the book, Wyatt and Wyatt, on business law. And, being an accountant, the accounting professors kind of had little, pocket calculators and pens in their pocket and all that. Well, Wyatt walked in a suit and a tie, and he started talking about the law. And what got me about it was a lot like baseball. There was a result. You had one side, the other side, you presented the case, and someone resolved it just like a baseball game. And I think it attracted me. And I said, I'd like to try law school. So I went to law school for a year, and then we lost our student deferments at that point. And I ended up going into the Army Reserve for 6 years. And went to Texas to join the reserves, came back to Miami Law School at that point, and I got a partial scholarship there. And in those days, it was the late 60s, early 70s, we were fighting Nixon and Haldeman and John Mitchell and all that kind of stuff. We were true believers, and it led me into a practice of criminal law. And we opened up our first office in the African-American part of Miami, and we renovated an old restaurant, Henry's Imperial Steakhouse. And we had our office in the kitchen. We sat under one of those oven hoods, and we had a little window, a takeout window. We'd sit there with the client, and our waiting room could have 250 people. It was the biggest waiting room in the history of law. And I practiced there for a year, two. And my friend, Richard Hammer, said, we can be lawyers in California and Florida. So we took both bars and passed them. And one thing led to another, and it brought me to San Francisco in 1972. And that started my sojourn into criminal law in the Bay Area, softball career for 35 years. I pitched slow pitch softball all over Northern California. And baseball was part of it. Law was a big part of it, but it was the passion for law that I had that I think I got through baseball. I think that gave me my first passionate event in my life, and it was good. And law gave me that passion fighting for the underdog. I think it's all related to baseball.
That's a tremendous story. And I love what you just said, Marty. A passion for fighting for the underdog and creating that law firm with your friend on both coasts. And you
Yeah.
do that for 25 years and you help people along the way. I mean, countless people along the way. Was it gratifying, Marty? Was it what you thought it would be?
Yes, it was even more than that because if you came in my office, you weren't leaving. I was going to take your case at that point, and I just felt that everyone needed representation, and I would fight for them as hard as I could. So it gave me a lot of that satisfaction. I probably handled 3,500 cases in my life. 100 homicide cases, 3 capital cases, death penalty cases beginning to end. So it was a fight. It was a fight every single day. And it finally wore me down in 1995. And people said, God, why don't you try baseball on the radio? And I said, what? How am I ever going to do that? And the story, Chris, you know some of it. I went to a little radio station and volunteered, and it was like being in court again. And I had judges call me up at halftime of the show and ask me questions and all that stuff. And I created something, and it eventually got me to the major leagues all on my own.
What is wonderful about what you're saying here is that you had a passion for baseball as a little kid, and then you found another passion in law. And now at 1995, when law became a little bit much, in your words, you got burnt out, you go back to your original passion and then find a third passion, which is communicating on the radio your love of baseball. You're a fortunate man to be able to see all those, those signs in your life. What were those initial days like when you were working for the A's, creating pre and post game shows and having to sell and do everything as part of the radio business? What was that like?
Yeah, it was a challenge to me, but I was a businessman. You talk about being lucky. I do the Lou Gehrig speech. I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth, the way he said it, being from New York. Um, you know, it was like being a lawyer again. It was like having the law practice and realizing that I could sell an ad and people had to believe in me, and I had to be honest and shake hands and collect money again, and I had to produce a show and I had to show up. And of course, the key in life is being available and showing up to work. And I showed up every day for 50 years, 52 years. I've been doing this stuff. So it was a challenge, but people liked it. Baseball is generational. The players are built on other players. The franchise, the great Giant franchise, the Yankee franchise, they're built on things that happened in 1910, 1920, 1930. I appreciated that. And baseball is kind of like a religion in a way. It's cultural. And you could tell the stories of baseball from 1920, 30, 40, 50, whatever it was. And people liked to hear it because it gave them the texture of what the game was all about. It's still the same game. The rules are a little different. What I could do that other people couldn't, and it's good to be old, as Mel Brooks says. I could connect the dots from 1950 or 1948 right to this morning. Or I could talk about John Montefusco from 1976, or I can talk about Bobby Bonds from 1968. I could talk about Willie Mays from 1954, or I could talk about George Kelly, High Pockets Kelly from 1924, the New York Giants. So it's a gift that I have. I love it. It makes me feel good, and I related that to the fan base, and they have responded to me. So I'd never been on radio before, but it was like being in court. The light comes on, and you got to talk. The judge says you're a witness. You've got to start asking questions to your witness. So there's a great preparation that goes into the work I do. As Chris, as you said, I produce the show, I get the guests, I sell the ads, I set the equipment up here, which has to be simple because I can't do anything mechanical. And I do it all myself. And it's a great feeling to be able to do that. But it is a challenge. And of course, selling the ads, and I'm back in business again. And it was like being a lawyer. It's the law practice just transferred into this, and I prepare these shows. I'll be on Saturday, Sunday, 4 hours before the first pitch during the season. Saturday, Sunday for a 3.5 hour show. I prepare that show like I prepared a trial in criminal court. It's the same type of pride and preparation. I don't leave a stone unturned, and that's the legacy that I think I bring to the radio.
But what about all that prep work, all the sales and all the, reading of the stats and going on the air, knowing you have to be prepared, just as you said, going in the courtroom, having to be prepared. What about the totality of these two businesses, Marty, and your role, both on the air per se, in the courtroom, and then behind the scenes?
Well, it's the same thing. You're asking open-ended questions to jurors or to ball players. You want to get their opinions. J.D. Davis was on with me this morning, and one of his idiosyncrasies was he got hot, and it was 3 for 4, 2 for 4, home run, and he had a grilled cheese sandwich before the game, and he said, "I'm going to have a grilled cheese sandwich every game." So my question today to him was, why grilled cheese? But the key was why. And I let him explain it as opposed to me telling the story of it. And that's the key to the law practice. That's the key to the baseball side. It's not about me. It's about the information I can elicit from a witness and present it coherently to a jury, or elicit it from a ball player and present it with entertainment to a radio audience. Now, in jurors, you're talking about a group of people, maybe 20 to 80, but mainly older citizens, as you try to eliminate most of the young people from jurors because they're so black and white. You need the gray area for a criminal jury, that it can see all sides of it. Well, in this baseball thing, I'm definitely trying to talk to the entire audience. I'm talking to teenagers, I'm talking to young people in college, and I get the feedback. They listen. And I'm also talking to people who are 70, 80 years old. And Chris, when the Giants won the World Series, I was on the air that night, and people called in and said, "Boy, this is great. My father died 30 years ago. My parakeet died 6 years ago. My dog ran away. I wish they could be here to share this." So I can relate to all of these kind of people in the radio. And I had to do it in the law practice too, because I was 50 years old and still representing young people, and you had to get their confidence. So there's clearly a connection. Now, leadership is very important to me because I consider myself someone who gives other people a chance. And I like to be a leader in bringing other people into the radio business, to give them a chance like I got a chance. Because in today's corporate world, there aren't any small stations anymore. But I bring people into KNBR. I've started 5 or 6 or 7 different local careers going on right now. I started Tom Candiotti's career in baseball broadcasting. Shooty Babbitt is another one. I've had people go to law school who I had employed as law clerks or secretarial help, paralegal help. I encourage them to go to law school. I've got a nice legacy of that, of people who've gone to law school under my tutelage. So my leadership is to relate to the people who work with me and give them a chance to do what I do. And I think that's a very important part of the man I am, is that I am concerned about other people. And whether it's Kerry Crowley from KNBR or Bill Lasky or Walter Ika Balsetta or Sandra Nolan or Mark Falconer, who is working with me now, they're all young people, and I've got them integrated into the show.
That is a legacy, Marty. That is a real legacy.
It is. I'm very proud of it.
Absolutely. And I could tell how much it means to you. and you are there to listen and mentor and teach and create opportunities for people, which I know they are very, very appreciative.
Yeah.
Marty, and you were talking about leadership, and in 1995, when you were working with the A's, and then up until 2010, when you transitioned over to the Giants, you've seen some great teams, and from those two fantastic organizations, the A's and the Giants. When you have seen the success on the field and you walk into those clubhouses, what are the similarities? What is it about the tangible nature of a winning clubhouse that you've observed being in and around baseball all these years?
Well, I think first of all, you have to have the players. You have to have the talent. That goes without saying. And what I've learned is over studying baseball for 70 years or so, you got to pitch. It's a long season. It's 162 games, 35 exhibition games. You're playing together for 200 games. You have to be physically fit, and you have to have about 35 or 40 players to get through that season because of the attrition. So there was a lot of camaraderie that if another player was slumping, which happens during the course of the 162, you have to pick them up. And the manager has got to handle 25 different personalities during the season. And Dusty Baker did it beautifully. Art Howe did it beautifully, that they can handle the clubhouse. So those are similarities that I saw. Because there's so many times you're traveling and 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, getting in, you're not getting enough sleep and all that kind of stuff. And you need the support of your teammate. You need to have fun with your teammate. You need to have an atmosphere where there's always, if it's R.B. Huff with the thong, or if it's the Red Sox with the shot of Jack Daniels before the game. Whatever it is, everybody's always got something in baseball that gets them through that period. So what I saw similarities with the Giants team, number one, the teams could pitch. They were great defensive teams, great defensive teams. They had great bullpens, and they hit with some power. And that was the key. And if they had to move a guy over, they went first to third on a single, and they played the game correctly. And I think that's a very common thing. But it's the camaraderie within the ball club. There's nothing better than a winning ball club because baseball is so schizophrenic. When you lose, you think your dog was run over by a steamroller. When you win, you've hit the lottery. And it's this way every night. You never know. You lose and you walk in, and my God, it's like a funeral. You win and you walk in, and it's like New Year's Eve. So it's keeping that balance over 162. And that's the big thing for me is within the organization and the clubhouse, you must be balanced. And both of those teams were very balanced.
And you mentioned two managers. You mentioned Art Howe and Dusty Baker, and obviously fantastic managers, right? Dusty just finally got his ring with the Astros. But look at the Bay Area and some of the managers: Tony La Russa, Hall of Famer; Bruce Bochy, eventual Hall of Famer; Felipe Alou. There's been a series of managers on both sides of the Bay that created those clubhouses, Marty, that you're talking about, that camaraderie. When you get in at 2 a.m. to be back and be a professional when you enter the clubhouse the next morning for a day game. So that's what you're alluding to, right? That we've been very fortunate in the Bay Area. I'm obviously living on the East Coast now, but I've lived 40 years of my life in the Bay Area. There's a lot of great baseball that has been played over the course of the last 20, 30 years.
Oh, no question. Look at Bob Melvin, Bo Mel, one of the best managers in baseball. He straightened everything out with the A's because they bring in new players all the time, and he did a great job with them. And then Bruce Bochy, people respect him. You don't have players going off the rails. A lot of other managers, you have players challenging him all the time. There's bickering within the clubhouse and all that. Bochy handled it. He was the John Wayne, as I like to say, of the cattle drive. And he was that kind of guy. And Bob Melvin got the respect. Art Howe got the respect from his players. Ken Maka was another one. We've been very fortunate. Felipe, I mean, to hear the things that he says that Ron Wotus quotes to me all the time, Felipe, show me the player first, show me the man first, not the player. And things like that they're so smart, they're so pithy. And Felipe should be in the Hall of Fame. Felipe was the first Dominican Republic player to come from the island to the major leagues. And Ozzie Virgil lived in New York, although he was Dominican at the time. But Felipe was the first one. He was eminently involved with the Latin Players Bill of Rights and all that stuff. Felipe was special. It's very. We have been blessed with the managers here in the Bay Area since about the early '90s.
The San Francisco Giants open the season this coming Thursday in Yankee Stadium. What do you think of that? You are from New York, obviously Brooklyn and the Dodgers territory. However, you're from New York. You've spent a lot of your life in California. And yes, those two teams have played over the years and over the course of interleague. However, this is really unique. The Giants at the Yankees.
Yes, it is. And that's the beauty of the schedule now, that every team in the National League will play every team in the American League on a home and away basis every other year. And that, I think, is very good for baseball. It creates definitely interesting matchups. This one, Aaron Judge, of course, almost became a Giant. And of course, he's now still with the Yankees. But like I say, I wanted the Giants to have a shot at the Yankees in the World Series because we owe them one from 1962 for Willie McCovey's line drive that Bobby Richardson caught, that Ralph Houck had the nerve to have Ralph Terry, a righty, pitch to the lefty. McCovey with Cepeda on deck. You did that today, my God, you'd be all over Twitter, and you'd probably lose your job 30 times. So we, as I say, the Giants owe the Yankees one. And here they are, Yankee Stadium, not just to play there, but to open the season there. It's going to be just spectacular.
Do you still get excited, Marty? Do you still get the same excitement you had as that little boy in going into Ebbets Field when you enter the ballpark, Oracle Park, Yankee Stadium, wherever the case may be? Do you still have that thrill and excitement that you had as a youngster?
Not as much, of course, because I'm a more experienced man in life now, and I've met the players. And, once you meet the players, you kind of realize who they are, and they're just people working hard, and the challenges that they have. So, the idols are gone. The Jackie Robinson still lives in my heart because I never met him. But, coming into the ballpark now, it's a little more of a job. And you want to, do it well. You want to relate to the fans. I can't wait to see people. But I think what I do feel is when I pull up to the park and see the stadium, and the stadium is empty, and I look at the walls and the outside, and I say, boy, this is like getting a new book. I don't know what this story is going to be today, but I'm telling you something, there is going to be a story here in 3 hours. So I think the thrill for me is seeing the ballpark. Once I'm in, and then in the nuts and bolts of the players and the interviews and running around and getting the job done, you don't quite have the admiration, let's say, or the idolatry for the actual player. When I started doing this job, I lost being a fan and became more of someone who is a little more professional about the sport.
Fair enough, Marty. Let's leave it there, Marty. Baseball season is here. You've enjoyed your time in Scottsdale, I bet, and now it's time to go back north, right? That's always a fun time for you, I bet.
Yeah, I'll be going up April 6th, and I have April 6th, we have Mardi Gras, which is a big party, MartyGras, and it's at Original Joe's in North Beach, and I've done it every year for about 8 or 9 years. We lost the COVID years, but we're back this year, and we take over the restaurant, 2 large rooms. We have 110 people coming. Mario Alioto will have hats, giant hats with Mardi Gras embroidered on the side. I get beads and give out beads to everybody, and we just have a fabulous meal. It sells out in 12 hours, and it's the start of the home season for us. It's the night before the home opener. So that's April 6th. So this is the first one I've done in a couple of years, and I'm very excited about it. And I can't wait. This is going to be fun. This is fun. Then the next day at the ballpark, come on, Chris, you know what it's like. The tent, the shrimp cocktail, and everybody, all the dignitaries and everybody else. There's something special. One last thing, I start talking. I'm a lawyer. I start talking.
Please, we love it.
Yeah, when I was a lawyer, opening day was a big deal. In San Francisco, it's a big deal. It was even in the lean years at Candlestick. I would buy 40 to 50 tickets for opening day and take everybody that I knew from the Hall of Justice, my children, it didn't matter. And I would take them every single year to opening day. So opening day for me still has a very special moment when it all starts, the marathon starts, and it's on opening day.
Great job, Marty. Great seeing you again. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. And we thank Marty very much for being on the show. My number one takeaway from this conversation was this. When Marty was a lawyer, he said he took pride in fighting for the underdog. And then he also said it was very fulfilling helping people launch their law careers, whether as a paralegal or a lawyer. Then he got into the radio business and again helped people launch their careers as broadcasters. And he listed all those folks that fit into that category as people Marty has helped. I really appreciate Marty Lurie and the conversation that we just had. And I know he's excited this week with the start of the baseball season. We thank Marty again, and I thank you very much for tuning in each and every week. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, I am your host, Chris Gargano. Have a great week, everybody. If you could like, subscribe, follow, we would love it. Thanks again. Take care. See you next week.
We thank you for listening to Keep the Line Moving. We would love it if you subscribed or left a review. For more podcast episodes, check out our YouTube page. If you'd like to work with the Gargano Leadership Group, check out our website. This has been a GLG production, copyright 2023. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal. Have a great week, everyone.